Excellent. Oh, I forgot to give him notice because I was late. Sorry about that. Sorry, Taylor. Okay, adoption of the minutes of June the 8th. Oh, sorry, no, adoption of the minutes, a regular evening council meeting of May the 25th. Anything in there that needs revising? Oh, could I have someone bring forward that, please? Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Van Elfen. All in favor? Thank you. Public notice. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel using the Zoom platform, youtube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public are encouraged to register their name and civic address for the speakers list at the beginning and at the end, or just following the CAO's report and at the end of the meeting before we adjourn, in advance of the meeting by emailing corporateofficer@summerland.ca. Those who have not registered in advance may call 250-404-4052 during the live meeting to be added to the speakers list. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Good thing we have a procedures. We have adoption of our procedures bylaw coming up. No, not tonight, but soon. And 6 is the main. As Vice Chair of the Regional Hospital District on on May the 27th, I attended the Spring Joint Interior Health Hospital Districts meeting. Interior Health hosts these meetings twice a year in the spring and the fall. As you would imagine, much of the information was related to COVID-19, including an update by IH's Medical Health Officer, Dr. Silvina Mima. As of May 27th, so that was the date of the meeting, only one person in the IH area is in hospital and no one is in ICU. 2 people have died and 96% of all cases have recovered. And again, this is in the Interior Health region. Dr. Mima stressed how important it is to continue to follow protocols and orders and to plan for a second wave in the fall. Whether or not we see this, it is better to be prepared. Also, IH is finding that is to care post-pandemic. Thought that was pretty interesting. Later that day, I participated in a teleconference about accommodating agricultural workers, well, in Summerland, but with the province. This matter is now in the hands of staff, and CAO Haddad will provide a public update when appropriate, maybe even later tonight. May the 28th, I attended the virtual RDOS Mayors/Chair/CAOs meeting. These sessions provide a way to talk about pandemic matters. And at this meeting, most of the discussion was on about how reopening is proceeding in our municipalities and the challenges of housing domestic agricultural workers. Councillor Holmes and I attended the RDOS meeting on June the 2nd, and as usual, he has prepared a report that will be posted on the website as part of this meeting's correspondence. The RDOS board meeting on, oh, I didn't put the date. Oh, sorry, that's the same date, June the 2nd. It was followed by the bi-weekly call with Minister Robinson, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Premier Horgan joined the call as well to hear from each of us what we've learned over the past 3 months and to answer questions raised by some of the mayors, regional district chairs, and CAOs on the call. After the call with the province, I joined the Okanagan Sustainability Leadership Council meeting. The OSLC is a nonprofit society dedicated to protecting and restoring the natural ecosystems while building healthy, resilient, and connected communities throughout the valley. The council has identified 4 priority initiatives: Zero Waste Valley, Intelligent Okanagan, Connected Communities, and Healthy Ecosystems, and the chair of each of these initiatives updated council members. More information is available at okslc.ca. Summerland and all of the provinces continuing to hold the line against the coronavirus. Unless there is a dramatic change in this trend, the Premier has indicated that we will be moving into phase 3 of BC's restart plan by the end of this month. Please continue to be mindful of the protocols and orders and take care of yourselves and one another. Be safe and continued health. And I would just like to add to the end of my mayor's report, my appreciation to Councillor Holmes for attending the BIPOC rally yesterday in Penticton at Gyro Park. It was great to see you there, and a few other Summerlanders as well. So thank you, Councillor Holmes, for attending that. And that's my mayor's report. CAO.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So just an update on Municipal Hall. So as the community are aware, property tax notices were mailed out at the beginning of June, which has led to a number of inquiries in terms of when Municipal Hall will reopen to the public. So we're in the final stages of reviewing our options for reopening and really ensuring the health and safety of our customers and staff is at the forefront of the plans, ensuring that we have the right protocols and procedures in place when we do reopen. So we're expecting that to take place over the next couple of weeks, and by the end of this week we'll have information out to council and the community around how the reopening plans will take place. So with regards to the property tax payments, we've been communicating to those calling in and to those out in the community on our Facebook page around the Dropbox that's available, the mail-in options, payments through our financial institutions, online payments, and also homeowner grants can be claimed online as well through the district's website. So plenty of alternative options right now, but we're looking forward to welcoming the community back into Municipal Hall within the next couple of weeks, and we'll have that information shortly to the community on timing and scenarios around how we'll make that happen to ensure we have the proper flows and distances through the building, especially with some of the space limitations when we look at our development services counter. But we're continuing to meet with our development industry online by appointments and taking advantage of some of the larger spaces within Municipal Hall to bring customers in and have their issues dealt with. So we'll continue to be flexible over the next little while, but as I said, we'll finalize protocols and be communicating that out to our residents and businesses over the next little while. Council, as you're aware, unfortunately, over the last couple of weeks, we've had a number of wildlife incidents with bears in the community, and had a really good conversation with Zoe Kirk, the regional district's wildlife officer and head of the Bear Aware program in the region. So she's going to be coming to council as a delegation over the next couple of council meetings. We just got to sort out the right time frame that we can get her there, and the conservation officer as well, just to provide council with an update, or council and the community with an update on the programs that are currently in place and how we can continue to enhance education within the district and within our residential communities in some of the peripheral areas where we have the interface issues. So we'll have more information on that over the next couple of weeks. Mayor Boot mentioned the domestic temporary worker accommodation, and this is obviously an issue that we're dealing with in the South Okanagan. The Ministry of Agriculture have hired contractor Bryn White to look at leading the charge, trying to coordinate some different opportunities and options within the South Okanagan. Looking at, I believe, 4 to 5 sites in the South Okanagan for potential camps that would house domestic temporary agricultural workers. So we're in the process right now working with Bryn and looking at a couple of different options in the community. And over the next couple of days, we're expecting the ministry to announce some additional funding that may come forward and help municipalities partner with housing of these workers. We sent a survey out to a number of our farmers and agricultural water users last week, and that information that's coming through via the responses from the agricultural water users is assisting us in trying to determine the number of workers that we need to accommodate. So that information's coming through since we sent the email out over the last week or so, and we're compiling that with Bryn and the ministry to enable us to have a solution developed over the next couple of weeks. And depending on which site is determined for this temporary location, we'll be looking at bringing that information to council, ideally at the next council meeting, if not beforehand, so we can give council a heads up on what's going there. So a lot of work in a relatively short period of time on that front, but certainly an important issue to have dealt with, given some of the potential health considerations and concerns that this issue has in our community, like the rest of the South Okanagan. So we'll have more information on that as well. And that's the crux of my updates. If there's any questions, happy to answer them where I can, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? No. Okay, thank you. It's now time for comments from the public. We can allocate 15 minutes in total and 2 minutes per speaker. I will, before I go into saying anything more about this, Karen, is there anybody that is on your speakers list?
There are no speakers on our list tonight.
Okay, so I don't have to finish with that. And I will ask you again at the end of the meeting during the next comment period. So on to number 9, development items, 9.1, 16820 Watson Road, ALR 20-002, non-adhering residential use, additional dwelling for farm help. And I'm very pleased to see that Arian Scott Iverson, is that your last name? Yes, our planning technician is going to be presenting this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, let me just open up. Okay. Can everyone see this? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay. Wonderful. So the district received a referral from the ALC for a non-adhering residential use for an additional dwelling for farm help located at 16820 Watson Road. In the OCP, the future land use designation of the property is agricultural, and it's also zoned A1 or agricultural small acreage. And as you can see on this slide here, these uses are consistent with neighboring properties. The subject property is also located within the Agricultural Land Reserve, and as such, the Agricultural Land Reserve use regulation applies. Given that the proposed additional dwelling for farm help is a non-adhering residential use, an application to the ALC is required. And as a part of this application process, local governments are given an opportunity to review the application to ensure that it's consistent with bylaws and policies. So the owner is planning on moving from the island to live in Summerland full-time. Their plan is to remove the apple trees that are currently on the property and to plant wine grapes. To do this, they would like farm workers to help with this transition, as vines and tree fruits are labor intensive, and one way to attract staff is to provide living accommodation, as rental housing in Summerland and within the region in general can be expensive and is often in limited supply. The owner has renovated a significant proportion of a shed on the property for the additional residents without the benefit of a building permit. And as you can see, the location is highlighted in this area right here. For reference as well, this is also the location of the primary dwelling. So within this process, staff advised the owner to stop work, and after several site visits, it appears as though the applicant has listened to staff. So if this application is forwarded to and approved by the ALC, the owner would still have to apply for a building permit. And on this slide here, you can see the work that's already been done. These photos were taken last week. So there's the dwelling, and then you can also see it in relation to the principal dwelling, and there are some pictures of the existing trees as well. So additional dwellings for farm help are permitted uses within A1 properties or within the A1 zone on properties that are greater than 2 hectares in size and where the intensity of the farming requires additional farm help as indicated by a professional agrologist. As part of their application, the owner provided a letter from a professional agrologist who noted that 2 full-time workers would be required. The proposed dwelling, as it is, meets zoning bylaw standards with regards to its size, its height, and siting within the farm home plate. The official community plan also strongly supports agricultural activity. So during the internal referral process, staff noted that the dwelling had been partially renovated without the benefit of a building permit and advised the owner to stop work. And we'll continue to work with the owner in that building permit process. And then at the May 15th meeting, the AAC ultimately supported the application, but raised concerns with respect to the tenure of the dwellings and wanted to ensure that they were not being used for short-term rentals. As a part of this, they asked that the owner provide a farm business plan indicating who would be living in which building. And yes, they've clearly indicated that they plan on moving into the residence that's there and then having the additional dwelling be lived in by the farm staff. So given that the additional dwelling for farm help is consistent with district regulations and policies that support agricultural uses, staff recommend that the application be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Questions, council, for staff? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. Could you tell me what is a farm business plan, and is that a reasonable request that we would require something like that?
So that was noted by the professional agrologist who sits on the Agricultural Advisory Committee. It's something that seems to be fairly typical and provides or gives farmers the opportunity to show their short and long-term goals with the property. So that could include like what they're planning on planting, if they require any additional helpers, where they'd be getting those helpers from, and so forth.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not so much a question as on our agrologist report, he noted that it was 8.5 acres, but yet the district's GIS system for land use says 7.5 acres. I don't think it has a bearing on anything, but just the report that was submitted isn't accurate. Thanks.
I'm going to start calling you Eagle Eye Doug. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to follow up to my previous question. So do we know if the applicant has a farm business plan or not, or is that something extra he would have to do?
Yeah, so they did provide one that was a part of an attachment within the report. Attachment 6 is their farm business plan. But they've also been speaking with growers within the region as well, and they're not currently a farmer as is, but they're being mentored by other farmers in the area and have several contacts to help them through the process.
Battle of the Dougs. Back to Councillor Patton and then to Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you tell me if the reason we went out to the property and did the stop work order was because of this application, or did we find them building and then we stopped them and then they came in regards to the farm worker housing? Do we know that information?
Anthony? Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So I believe staff identified this during a typical, this site's located right near the access to Hunters Hill. And I believe staff went past and identified some construction happening there, which triggered a review of the file. And there's obviously no permit that was picked up. So that's when the issue was identified. And from all reports, the applicants stopped since that issue was identified, and they're working with us to move this application forward.
Thank you.
I had the same question and query. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, any other questions? I have one question. It does speak to our regulation bylaw 2013-017 about commencing work without a required building permit and the fines associated with that. I note that is not part of this because we're going to we're talking about whether or not it gets sent on to the Agricultural Land Commission. If it comes back and if it's approved and the applicants come in to get that building permit, is that the time that that discussion will take place with the proponent? That staff will speak to them about that?
Yeah, so
Okay.
when the building permit, before the building permit is issued, or I guess as the building permit is issued for the eventual unit, should the ALC and council support it, the permit fee will be doubled because of the construction in advance of permit being obtained.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
I'm just wondering if the applicant has provided a letter which sort of indicates their farm business plan, which isn't necessarily a farm business plan. It's something that the Ag Advisory Committee asked the applicant bring forward a farm business plan and leave it to the capable hands of council to determine if this was a legitimate farming enterprise, and it was going to be used as a legitimate bona fide housing facility for farm workers, and so it is up to us. I'm just wondering, is it like if the applicant goes ahead and starts to apply for permits to do other things that aren't in the farm business plan, say they want to put in a giant barn, put in this, put in that, and start doing something that's different than what is in that proposal, is there any recourse that council has based on what we've been told versus what, there still could potentially be a change?
Yeah, through the chair, Madam Mayor, I think the farm business plan is specific to this application. Should they come in and apply for another accessory building, that'll be subject to the zoning that exists on that property. So if they took out the grapes in the future and planted something else that triggered an additional demand, that I don't believe would come back to council, because once this approval is in place, there's no requirements for them to, I guess, continue on with that farm business plan. It's the information that's provided at the time of this application that council are making a decision on.
So if they what if they never put in grapes? What if they take out we give them permission, they take out the apples, it sits there as fallow, or they put a hayfield in or something? Is there any recourse there?
I don't believe so. I think because unless there's some type of covenant that restricts the specific type of use, of the property around the types of trees or vegetation trees that get planted on the property, that would certainly restrict it. The application in front of us is for a vineyard, and the business plan that's been asked for by the Ag Committee has supported this proposal that's in front of us. But unless there's some sort of restrictive covenant that's put on title tying the approval of this, I guess, dwelling unit or farm worker housing unit to the certain type of use, it will be difficult. And again, monitoring that in the future would be extremely difficult as well.
So then, just to follow up, if you don't mind, does it make sense to have farm worker housing in place before any farming activity is taking place on this farm? I know it's happened before, and we keep giving permission to people to put things into land that's not actually being used for what they say it's going to be used for. I know one that comes to mind is on the corner of Prairie Valley and Bathville. That was one of the first. There's a beautiful new house there, and council gave permission to that farmer, that owner, to use the house for farm workers under the presumption that they were going to take that orchard and turn it into something viable and operate. And I just worry that that might happen over and over if we give permission before there's actually something that needs to be farmed by those two workers.
Yeah. And there's the potential through Chair, Madam Mayor, that the building permit we could potentially, if the council provide a recommendation, there may be the ability to hold up the issuance of that permit until the vineyard or the grapes are actually planted in the ground. So that may be something that council provides some direction on for us to work with the applicant on. I see Mayor Boot has dropped off the line, so give her 2 seconds to try and get back in.
Excuse me, Anthony, while we're waiting for Mayor Boot, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
Do we enter into, and I believe I've asked this before, but when we're talking in regards to farm worker housing, do we have them enter into a 219 covenant, or do we have them enter into another land use covenant, I guess, which I don't know if there is another one, that indicates that if the structure is not being used for farm worker accommodation, it would have to be decommissioned. I believe we were talking about that. It came up with Okanagan Crush Pad on the one that he was doing, and they had like 2 years. If it was vacant for 2 years, then it would be decommissioned. Is that something through us, or is that something through the Agricultural Land Commission?
Yeah, I think there was a discussion through the draft policy and zoning amendments that was brought forward through the temporary farm worker housing information. I think we brought through, that's been through council a couple of times over the last year or so. And through those draft regulations, there's a requirement for a statutory declaration to be provided on an annual basis that shows that farm worker housing is being used for that purpose. So that's, again, not part of this application because we're dealing with the one-off. We don't have those general regulations in place yet. They're still getting reviewed through the development committee, and they're eventually going to make their way back to council. But there could be a requirement, if council deemed that appropriate, to require that statutory declaration on an annual basis to be provided, advising the district that the use that has been approved is continuing on an annual basis. So there's some options there for consideration. A covenant's another way or another tool that could restrict the use of that unit.
Yeah, if I may, I think that no matter what we look at, if there's going to be district resources need to be taken for compliance measures is what I guess comes down to it, right? Like it would be up to the district's bylaw
Correct.
to check to ensure that the property was being used for the intended purpose.
Correct. And even the covenants are great, but they're only as good as the two eyes that sign the two parties that sign the covenant agreeing and enforcing it moving forward. Same with a statutory declaration. They can get onerous, and that was certainly part of the discussion at the development committee around actually monitoring those on an annual basis.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I lost my connection, so I've had to move indoors. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So just following up on what Councillor Carlson was saying, I understand where she's coming from. Kind of puts us in a difficult position, because presumably the farmer will want to have his staff on place to remove those trees and do the new planting. So if you wait until the planting is before you approve the building, it's not really going to help them. So it's a tough one. It's a chicken and egg thing almost. That's it.
Thank you. I also had something following up on what Councillor Carlson was talking to you about, and please let me know if somebody has asked it in my absence. I'm wondering, she was talking about what if they do not adhere to the business plan, and the response was, well, this is submitted with this particular application going forward. But Councillor Carlson also mentioned, well, what if they plant something different, or what if they just let it go fallow? It's really with that comment, what if they just let it go fallow, that makes me wonder if we have any recourse, because if it's lying fallow, then it means that they don't need the agricultural farm worker housing. So is there anything that can be done about that? And again, I apologize if I've missed this question and answer already.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. And Ariane, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's anything I'm missing on this one, but there is the potential for a restrictive covenant, for example, to be placed on this property that would restrict the use of the building to farm worker housing only. That would potentially deter any, I guess, unwarranted use of the building for a vacation rental, for example. If that was that's I think where largely the concern came from originally, and through the Ag Committee. So covenant's a tool. We were discussing the draft temporary farm worker housing regulations and amendments to our zoning bylaw that we brought through council a couple of times, and requirements in there speak to a statutory declaration that could be used to, on an annual basis, be provided by the property owner to staff to prove that the building is being used for its intended purpose. So there's a couple of different tools that are available to make sure the building is used as council see it in front of them with this application.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just need to get Councillor Van Elfen on my screen. There you are. Do you have any questions? You're good. Okay, thank you. Oh, you do have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. But this also could apply that they can have the temporary farm workers in place, remove the orchard, plant a vineyard, and then enter into some type of lease agreement with somebody for a long term. Once they enter into a lease agreement, the farm workers accommodation is no longer needed. So I like, what we're looking at for the future with farmers having to, basically send that plan in on a yearly basis to qualify. that building. If that makes any sense. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
So if we were to request a statutory covenant or a covenant that would restrict it to being farm worker housing only, which as I understand is quite common, is that something you need in the motion that comes forward tonight?
Yes, so we'd need council to pass that resolution, and obviously this, if council support the whole application, we'd send that through to the Agricultural Land Commission with that condition for them to consider as well.
Okay. And who will enforce that? Say we don't have a regulation around statutory declaration. Who's going to enforce it being used for farm worker housing? The ALC with their bylaw or the district with theirs?
So if it's a covenant between the district and the property owner, then it'll be up to the district to enforce that and make sure our bylaw team are aware of that restriction.
Okay, thank you. I feel like it should be a very common restriction. I know it is in the RDOS from what I understand or from what I've been through. And so I would bring forward the motion as presented with an extra piece to the motion, making sure that there's a restricted covenant registered on that title or on that building that ensures it is only used for temporary farm worker housing. And if it's not being used for that, that it become change of use or decommissioned.
Councillor Holmes, are you seconding? And you'd like to speak to this as well?
Yes. Just clarification, temporary farm workers, why can't they have permanent farm workers in there? This would be to Councillor Carlson because it was her motion.
Well, all of the, because I don't believe that they need two people working 365 days a year round to run 8 acres, 7.5 acres of vineyard. I think that, especially if the owners live on site, I think it's, but I believe the ALC also knows that, and that the professional agrologist that has commissioned this letter probably also knows that.
Okay.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not that I'm in disagreement with the motion, it's just that every time another one of these applications come forward, then we're going to be asking for a restricted covenant on each and every property. It's, you know, it's a possibility. It's just something to think about.
Before I go back to you, Councillor Carlson, I just have a question, and I'm not a farmer, so either one of you can answer this question. Councillor Van Elfen, a minute ago you mentioned that if the owner, can't remember his name, Jason something, if he decides that he's going to lease, then there would no longer be a requirement for on-site farm worker housing. But wouldn't, if it's being leased and farmed, is it against the, I guess, Agricultural Land Commission, or maybe against our bylaw, for on-site farm workers to live on-site when it's being leased out to somebody else? Yes, please.
That's an excellent question. I don't have the answer for that. So if they turn around and have a long-term lease on their vineyard, then do they lease out their farm workers' accommodation to the farmer that's leasing, and that becomes a revenue stream? I honestly, I don't know the answer. It's something that I think we need to check with the ALC on, possibly. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for bringing that up.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson, do you have an answer to
Um,
that?
I don't have an answer to that, but I know that, well, there was a letter in the paper written by someone who has lots of farm worker housing and has never leased that to us as the ones that need the farm worker housing on his property. So I think that it would be a preference of people not to. He should be able to lease it. I don't think that there's a regulation that would disallow that. The question or the comment I just wanted to make is that, yes, putting a restrictive covenant on to every single farm worker housing accommodation that comes forward might be a good idea. Where it becomes a problem is where you're asking the lease, if there's a farmer who is leasing that property, you're asking the leasee, the person who you're leasing from, to put a covenant on their property. And that, I believe, is a problem. So if I'm the owner and I'm the one building that facility, I should accept that there may be a covenant on it. If I'm the owner and I'm leasing a property, I shouldn't expect that the person that owns that property is going to hold a covenant against their property because they're leasing it to me. There's a difference between those two things, and I think that that's one of the reasons that the whole bylaw went back to have a conversation again, because there's a difference there. And as a landowner, I don't think that people should have a problem with a covenant that says that they must use their housing for what they say they're using their housing for.
Okay. Councillor Barkwell, did you have your hand raised?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought I had in the back of my mind that the Agricultural Land Commission now permitted 2 residences on farmland and didn't enforce that they should be for farm worker use necessarily. And I just wasn't sure if that was the new rules or just rules that were being discussed about or discussed. Does our CAO know for sure?
I don't have the ALC. I know there's some differences within our zoning bylaw around who can occupy second homes based on, or secondary dwelling units on agricultural property based on the Agricultural Land Reserve or Land Commission's regulations that came out. And that difference is family members versus workers. Family members are permitted in the ALC, and our zoning bylaw does not permit family members to be in those second dwelling units. So there's a difference there that would restrict, I guess, family members living in this, for example, if that was the ultimate goal. But I think the covenant, for example, is a tool that can be used to restrict this based on the application that's in front of council, based on the farm plan, and based on the information that's provided by the agrologist.
Okay, any further discussion on this? I am going to ask Ms. Needham to read the amended motion, please. Well, I guess it's not amended, but different from what the staff recommendation was.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the recommendation that is before us now is the application be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission, and that council directs staff to register a restrictive covenant on title that will limit the use of the dwelling to temporary farm worker housing.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Where is Doug? Doug, you're good? Councillor Carlson.
Yeah, just briefly, I know that these ones can be quite challenging to discuss and to talk about, and the Ag Advisory Committee had a good conversation about it. I think because there's an existing building and an existing footprint and it's within the farm home plate currently, it's a more acceptable request to ask of and to allow to go forward at this time. I do think that it's unfortunate that the building was being done without permits, and that things haven't proceeded the way that we would have liked them to have proceeded. And so it's just another cautionary tale, I believe. So I will support it, but a little bit reluctantly.
Okay, seeing no more hands raised, I will call the question. All in favor? And any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And now on to 9.2. Thank you very much, Ms. Scott Iverson. On to 9.2, 10309 Prairie Valley Road, OCP and rezoning.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I will stop. I will share the right screen and so council seeing the PowerPoint presentation with the OCP amendment. Okay, so this application is located on at 10309 Prairie Valley Road. The subject property is designated as low density residential within the city's or district's official community plan, and zoning bylaw is for institutional use. The site's also located adjacent to a watercourse development permit area that is located on the existing Montessori school and school district property line. And you can see it joins the property to the north over the other side of the street as well. So this application is, I guess, a couple of photographs, first of all, just to show council the site. Photograph number 1, view taken from the street, looking into the development. Photograph number 2, looking from the adjacent parcel to the east, looking to the center of the subject parcel. And photographs 3 and 4, looking at different directions, but to give you a good perspective of where the property is and what the existing conditions are like on the property, the photos, and we can refer back to these as part of the discussion as well. So the purpose of this application is to consider an amendment to the OCP and zoning bylaw. The OCP to change the designation from low density residential to administrative, and from the zoning point of view, rezone the parcel from residential medium lot zone, which RSD1, to institutional zone. The applicant has been working on this project to look at consolidating the parcel of land that contains the Montessori school on the western portion of the parcel. The subject property and 10317 Prairie Valley Road share a common owner who plans to consolidate the properties into one parcel by removing the interior lot line to expand their existing Montessori school and childcare facilities. As a result, in order to accommodate the development, the OCP and zoning amendments are required. This up on the screen and provided within the council agenda package show the, on the left-hand side of the screen, show the conceptual design for the eventual layout of the property, showing the infant toddler center and the age 3 to 5 center on the eastern portion of the property, which is subject to the zoning and OCP amendment. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see some of the illustrations and concepts that have been put together by the applicant, which outline and show the proposed development. With regards to district policies, the proposed OC amendments to the OCP and zoning bylaw are in staff's review consistent and compatible with the neighboring land uses, in particular Giants Head Elementary. In addition to the uses being similar to the Summerland Montessori School, it also provides pickup and after-school care for students attending the elementary school. The OCP encourages the development of institutional uses along collector and arterial roadways. The location of the Montessori School and Childcare Center on Prairie Valley Road, which is classified as an arterial road within the Transportation Network Master Plan, is consistent with this policy. The the properties most likely to be affected by this proposal are those abutting the subject property on Beavers Place, as well as 10305 Prairie Valley Road. And I'll go back to the air photo showing the potential impact on the properties. You can see, if we look back at the zoning, the property directly to the east, where the single family location exists, is largely the parcel of land that would likely be impacted the most through this zoning and OCP application. The maximum height within the residential medium lot zone is a lesser of 9.5 meters or 2 stories. Rezoning the subject property to institutional increases the building height to the lesser of 14 meters or 4 stories, representing a 4.5 meter difference. The change in land use also increases the maximum lot coverage from 40% to 50%. Given the residential uses of the neighborhood, this could have an impact on the massing and form and character of the maximum development potential, if the maximum development potential is realized for this property. Although no building permit plans have been submitted for the subject property, as I said earlier, the concepts show the location of the future development of what's intended to take place on this property. Rezoning of the subject property from RSD1 to institutional would also increase the minimum side yard setback from 1.5 to 5 meters. So that provides an increased separation or buffer between the existing single family property and the subject property with this application. The applicants intending on installing a fence to be constructed on the property line for privacy. But again, not a lot of detail at this stage, given that we're dealing with the rezoning and OCP amendment. So the application was referred to our internal departments, no external departments referred for comment. The application was also submitted and reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission. The Planning Commission supported the application, but were concerned about the potential of future heights, especially when you look at that 4-story height limit within the institutional zone and the interface and impact that could have on the adjacent residential property. So the recommendation coming out of the committee was that, the Planning Commission was that the application be supported on a condition that a restrictive covenant be registered on title to limit the height of the buildings to the lesser of 9.5 meters or 2 stories, which reflects the existing zone of the property and the zone of the property adjacent to the east. The applicant was part of that discussion as well and did not have any objection. And as you can see from the concept plans provided, the maximum height that is actually being proposed for the building is only a single story structure. So staff believe that this condition, which is recommended for council consideration, is appropriate to reduce the impact longer term should there be a building height over and above that 2-story being proposed. So the recommendation in front of council contains a couple of different components. As part of the OCP amendment and in accordance with section 475 of the Local Government Act, council needs to consider whether early and ongoing consultation, in addition to the required public hearing, is necessary with one or more persons, organizations or authorities. And that includes, in our circumstance, the one or more persons, organizations or authorities, the regional district, the Okanagan-Similkameen, local First Nations, which would be the Penticton Indian Band, school district number 67, and or the provincial or federal government and their agencies. So as part of council's consideration of this application, that's there for council's discussion and direction. Staff have determined that additional notification is not required. However, we have reached out to the Penticton Indian Band, given that this is an OCP amendment, and we forwarded the application off to them for some comments. And however, if council wish to provide any additional direction to provide more of a formal circulation, we'll certainly oblige. The second part of the recommendation includes moving or providing first and second reading to the OCP amendments, the zoning bylaw, and forwarding the application to the public hearing on July 6th. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
I was just thinking about I think the process has worked well to get that recommendation from the Advisory Planning Commission to limit the height of the building, and so that part is done before it reached council. But also, isn't that building isn't very far from where we had a big controversy about a garage, like a carriage house on a garage being a second story. So even 2 stories there, is that sort of above the height that we would permit a carriage house in that area?
I don't have the zoning bylaw on me, but the zoning bylaw will restrict the single family zone, which I assume the carriage house is located in, would have that maximum height of 9.5 meters. So unless there was a variance issued for that carriage house height, they would have had to comply with that that maximum height requirement.
Yes, I don't remember the numbers. In.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So as a school, Montessori receives statutory property tax exemption, permissive tax exemption. Do childcare centers also receive a statutory exemption? Do we know?
I don't have that answer. I can certainly look into that.
I'm just wondering, and then if the lots are consolidated into one parcel, does that then mean that both parcels are automatically receive a permissive tax exemption or not?
I believe so, but again, I don't have that information in front of me. But we can certainly get that for council. For the
I'd be
public.
curious to know what is the reason? What is the reasoning for consolidating into one parcel? Is there anything that says that they can't do without consolidation?
Typically, the buildings, like depending on where the location of the future building is or any future plans, I guess into the future, the buildings wouldn't be able to cross the property lines. We'd have to that may be part of the reason for the consolidation, but again, we can get the property owner and Montessori school in attendance at the public hearing to maybe answer that question. I assume it's really to consolidate all their operations on one location, on one parcel of land.
I'd also like if we can, because it says financial implication in the staff report, there'd be no financial implications, but there would be if we lose tax revenue. But so I would like to know what those implications are, and how the permissive tax exemption would affect this. Thanks.
Certainly, we'll look into that.
Oh, he's gone for a minute. I'm just gonna, if I could ask a follow-up question on what Councillor Holmes was just asking. Does the permissive tax exemption only apply to the buildings and not the general area, or is it may be different for schools? I'm just thinking of how it's applied to the churches in our community. Do you know?
That's a good question. Something I can certainly follow up with our CFO on and see if I can get an answer for that question as well.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question. Does anybody on council have a question? It's not right now. So I'm going to ask my other question. I know that, let's see, it's proposed lot A, right? That they're looking at consolidating with the existing lot. Is that correct?
Correct. I believe
Yes.
so. Yep.
And it shows in one of the slides that you showed us, it shows the water course there really impacting the other side and the Giants Head School. There wouldn't be any need for a water course development permit in the consolidation piece, would there?
No, not for the consolidation. It depends if there's an addition to the existing school, that will trigger the water course development permit. If the new building would be on the new parcel that's added to this
Right.
land holding, would not be subject to that water course development permit. However, as I said, if there's any building or construction or works inside that blue area, I guess the development permit area, then that would trigger the development permit.
Okay. Yes. And there is a proposal to do an addition, but it's hard for me to kind of sort it out in my brain where that potentially would be. Okay, thank you. That answers those questions. Any other questions for our CAO? All right, so Councillor Councillor Holmes, with the questions that you and I asked about permissive tax exemption, how do you feel about proceeding with what we have before us tonight, or would you like to have that information before we consider this any further? I guess how much of a you know, of a barrier is that?
I don't know. I mean, because I don't know what I don't know, right?
Yes, you don't know what you don't know. Okay. Councillor Patton, you had your hand raised? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe it was yourself or Councillor Holmes discussing the lot line consolidation. The BC Building Code does allow a building to cross property line as long as there is an agreement in place between the owners of each property. So in this case, they wouldn't really have to, unless it deals with our land use where we require them to do a lot line consolidation. But if it's the permissive tax in regards to the one lot, then this is how it could be done. Where if it was a daycare going on, that on the one lot, they wouldn't have to do the consolidation if it was where it was going to adversely affect us in regards to the for a tax exemption in regards to the lot. So there is some room in there, which our CAO will be able to determine. But that might be something that we may want to consider also or discuss with the owner in regards to that property. Thank you.
Okay. You see that Karsten has joined us tonight. So could I ask somebody to bring forward the first recommendation so that we can get that on the floor and we can have some discussion about whether or not further consultation is a requirement as far as council's wish? Councillor Patton.
Shall I read it, Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
That prior to consideration of OCP Amendment Bylaw number 2020-009 in accordance with section 475 of Local Government Act, Council consider whether early and ongoing consultation, in addition to the required public hearing, is necessary with one or more persons, organizations, or authorities, the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, local First Nations, School District number 67, and the provincial or federal government and their agencies. And that it is determined that the public consultation conducted to date is sufficient.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Van Elfen? Okay, so any discussion on this? Councillor Traynor?
Sorry, I'm just a bit confused. Were we supposed to determine what out of that list we wanted consulted still? Or?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I think if council consider that consultation in addition to the public hearing is necessary, then we'd receive that direction on any of those or
Okay.
other parties.
So the actual recommendation though would just include the ones that we want out of that list, right?
Yeah, so I think council need to consider out of those 5 groupings, I guess, if an additional consultation is required. Staff have recommended that consultation completed is sufficient. However, should council wish additional consultation to take place, we'd receive that direction and follow through with it.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes?
Thank you. So what consultation has taken place to date with these 5 groups?
So the public hearing is the consultation that will take place. There hasn't been any consultation taken place yet, other than the notification that we've sent to the Penticton Indian Band regarding the OCP amendment.
So we have sent notification to the PIB?
Yes.
Yes?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the Penticton Indian Band, I guess that's number 3, local First Nations. That particular, Prairie Valley is a some time ago, of course, that was a settlement area for the First Nations, and I would think particularly around areas where the water exists. So I'm wondering if there might be the opportunity to engage with the local First Nations and just make sure that there aren't any archaeological sensitivities in that area.
Certainly, Madam Mayor. We've had a review of the mapping system, the provincial mapping system, and there hasn't been any sites of archaeological significance identified on the site. However, there may be additional information that the band can provide us if that with their mapping, which I know goes into a lot more detail than we have access to.
Well, that's certainly something I would like council to consider, but that's just putting that out there. Thank you. Any thoughts on that? Or if you have other groups that you'd like to have for the consultation with Councillor Holmes?
I'm satisfied with the consultation that's been done to date. If we've sent the initial letter to the PIB, and we've checked the archaeological maps with the province, I think that's our due diligence there. I don't really think the other organizations, if they want to participate, they'll participate in the public hearing. So I'm good with just proceeding as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, I would suggest that this is a relatively minor, inconsequential kind of a change. There's still the public hearing process. And as far as the water course goes, I note that the creek runs in a very straight line, north-south there to some point beyond Prairie Valley Road and then meanders a bit. So I doubt if that's the original stream bed anyway.
In my view, I agree with you about the straightness of the course there, and it probably is human corrected. But to me, that makes it even more important that we make sure that we're not inadvertently, I don't mean we, I mean the proponent there is not inadvertently unearthing archaeological material. But like I said, that's just my take on this. And if it's not the wish of the remainder of council, then that's fine.
Some might say that it wasn't a human corrected at all, that it was uncorrected or something, that straightening the creek was no correction.
Very true. So is it, I'm asking this question of Ms. Needham. If we were to, so we've considered this for 1 to 5. Um, I'm not sure how this should be changed. Or does it need to be changed?
Madam Mayor, I believe the motion is on the floor. And so it can be voted on, or an amendment can be recommended or suggested.
So, because we have considered whether early and ongoing consultation in addition is necessary, and that we have determined that public consultation, I mean, depending on the vote, of course, conducted to date is sufficient, then we can just leave it as it is on the floor. Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this then before I call Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I kind of have the same confusion here, what we're voting on. So we're voting on saying that what's being done is sufficient and we don't need to do any more. Is that what we're voting on? Yeah.
Correct. And if council deem that additional consultation is required for any of those parties, then that's the direction that we'd take. We'd add that separately.
Councillor Traynor, did you have something to add?
That was my question at the beginning. I think it's just worded really weird because it looks like we were supposed to read it and then pick out anything that we wanted to and make a motion from that. So it's not a big deal. It's worded awkwardly. So that's why I think there's the confusion. But I think from our discussion, we're okay with what's gone on so far and to move forward. That's
Okay. Okay. So I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that is carried. And then if I could have somebody bring up 2 and 3 together, and then we can talk about the restricted covenant piece. Anyone on council? Thank you, Councillor Patton.
I shall carry on, Madam Mayor. That official community plan bylaw amendment 10309 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2020-009 be introduced and read a first and second time. And that a public hearing be held on July 6, 2020 to receive public feedback on official community plan bylaw amendment for 10309 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2020-009. And number 3, that zoning bylaw amendment 10309 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2020-011 be introduced and read a first and second time. And that a public hearing be held on July 6, 2020 to receive public feedback on zoning bylaw amendment 10309 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2020-011.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. Seconder? Councillor Van Elfen, thank you. Any Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. So when will we get the information regarding the permissive tax exemption? If we can't take any new information after the public hearing, will we be receiving that before the public hearing?
Correct. So we'll get that information this week and be able to circulate to council. We'll also make sure that information, those answers are presented to council before the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have a question about the public hearing itself and how that will be conducted. Obviously, if it's a public hearing, we need to hear from the public. So thoughts on how that might proceed?
Madam Mayor, we are implementing with our notification information regarding the ability to provide written correspondence or to make representation to council, whether that be through registering to a speakers list ahead of time or phoning into the meeting. The applicant will also be invited to speak at the meeting, as is the procedure and the practice for public hearings.
Yes. Good, thank you very much. So continuing with what we've got in place already, And we've tested, but we haven't had the opportunity to go live with that. Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or discussion on these resolutions 2 and 3? I will call the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. And then on to the fourth recommendation there. Back to you, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Number 4, that a restrictive covenant be registered on title to limit the maximum height of principal and accessory uses to the lesser of 9.5 meters or 2 stories to reflect the height of adjacent RSD1 zone properties.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Van Elfen. Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. And then again, any questions or discussion? Councillor Patton. Sorry, Councillor Holm.
Yeah, again, just for clarification, so this would be dependent on the zoning bylaw and the OCP amendment actually passing, would it not?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Holmes, you're in favor? Yes, good, thank you. Okay, so that's a unanimous vote as well. Thank you. On to 9.3, road closure and removal of highway dedication bylaw number 2019-035. And I will call on Ms. Needham to present this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So at the May 25th regular evening council meeting, this particular item was brought forward and was referred to this meeting pending the outcome of all 3 property owners who are acquiring that land for the road closure, signing the purchase and sale agreement. So that agreement now has been signed. So all 3 parties have signed for the road closure and ownership and consolidation with their property, and we can proceed with adoption of that bylaw.
Thank you. Question for our corporate officer. Okay, seeing no questions, could I have someone bring forward the recommendation that it be adopted? Thank you, Councillor Holmes.
You want me to read it? I feel we've closed this road about 10 times already. Move that road closure and removal of highway dedication 19609 Matsu Drive, bylaw number 2019-035 be adopted.
Thank you. Seconder? Really just a housekeeping ones. Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries as well. Item 10 here is a notice of motion. Are there any councillors that would like to bring forward a notice of motion? Okay. And then on to number 11, councillor reports. And where's my little list? Here we are. We are going to start tonight with Councillor Holmes.
Okay, thank you. So I gave you my RDS report, so I won't, unless there's any questions about that, so I won't read that out again. I attended a Chamber of Commerce meeting last week, and there was talked about their destination marketing program. So the Chamber is working with the South Okanagan Tourism Alliance, and that's all the destination marketing organizations in South Okanagan, from Peachland to Osoyoos and over to the Smilkameen. And so they're trying to put together a coordinated marketing approach to attract visitors to the region. So it's kind of, this downtime has given them an opportunity to start working together, which they had long talked about doing, but this never really got around to it. So that's a good thing. And the visitor center offices remain closed. They're talking to the other visitor information centers around the region, so to again have a coordinated approach. And right now the chamber is working on putting a safe workplace plan in place to be ready once reopening is deemed to be appropriate, but there's still no real indication of when that might be. And that's about it, Madam Mayor.
Good, thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trainer.
Nothing to report either at this time. Thanks.
Councillor Barkwell in the apple orchard.
Yeah. You noticed I moved during the meeting pretty quick. So yeah, nothing really of local interest to report tonight.
Councillor Carlson.
I also have nothing new to report.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Councillor Patton.
And I will have to follow in the steps of my colleagues, and I have nothing new to report either.
Okay, right. That's quick and easy. Thank you. And now we are on to item 12, the opportunity for the public and the media to comment. Again, I will defer to you, Ms. Needham. Any action on your side?
Sorry,
Any action on your side?
no action on this side, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Well, that makes it easy, I guess. So I will ask someone to bring forward adjournment of this meeting. Councillor Patton, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Any opposed? So that carries.